and welcome to the Pig and Whistle Tales from Azeroth. As always, here at the Pig and Whistle Inn in Stormwind, I go through a variety of subjects with regards to World of Warcraft. And this week, on the midweek episode, we're going to be going over Rate My Dungeon, and we're coming towards the end of the classic dungeons now, which is actually quite a lot of episodes, to be honest. But we're going to be going over Maul. Now, I was conflicted as to whether to do 3 separate episodes, but I've kind of congested it into one. The reason for this being, Maul has 3 sections to it: Maul East, Maul West, and Maul North. All are separate instances, but they all connect as well. So it's kind of like a lower Blackrock and upper Blackrock spire, but not as large, I want to say. Not as like, they're 2 separate instances, them ones, because one of them is a 10-man instance and the other is 5, whereas all of these are connected and you can literally go from one to the other without having to invite 5 additional people, essentially. So, Maul in its entirety. We have 18 bosses, 19 with a rare included. The layout of the instance is very simple, but it is very vast. It is a very vast dungeon, a very vast structure. If you try and think about it on a map, if you think of any zone, sort of take Darkshore, for example. Darkshore is the second zone that Night Elves see, and essentially think of the entire length of it. That would be how long Maul is, essentially. That's the amount of ground that it covers. So that's kind of the best scale that I can give, or something like Westfall, the second place for humans, that kind of thing. All of them are connected via like small passages. They're not like very blaring, like put together things. They're very small passages, where like you can crawl through, and there's usually only a few mobs and stuff. But yeah, essentially it is all one sort of network, and you can accidentally get lost. It is very linear, but at the same time it isn't, which makes it a good dungeon in my opinion, honestly. Some of the loot in there is your best in slot loot. What I mean by best in slot is essentially if you're level 60 maximum, you can get some of your best gear before you go into raid in these instances, such as Tarnished Elven Ring for Hunters, Rogues, stuff like that. Any melee, you can get a couple caster pieces. This is where the home of the Warlock quest chain actually is, to get your epic Warlock mount. Which is really cool. You have to kill a demon and then enslave sort of the Dreadsteed, essentially. So yeah, you can get a lot of useful items in Maul, as well as cooking recipes. You can get a lot of minerals, herbs, and stuff, because there is a garden in Maul. So you can pick a lot of herbs such as Dreamfoil, Sungrass, Grom's Blood. What are the others? You can't get Plague Bloom in there. What was the other high one? Oh, I can't remember. But yeah, a lot of herbs that range from high levels to low levels, essentially. As well as rich thorium veins, which at the time included arcane crystals, and arcane crystals were very lucrative. They would go for a lot on the auction house, as they were used on some of the best enchants in the game. Now, did they have a revamp in Cataclysm? No, they didn't. They left it exactly how it is, which is 3 separate dungeons, but all sort of connected. They didn't change it at all, but essentially you don't get any... Once you've joined in the random group finder, when you've killed the last boss, you get your bonus XP and you leave. You don't necessarily go searching for the other bosses. There's no need to, stuff like that, because obviously you outgear or out-level the gear very fast nowadays in retail when you are leveling. It's one of them weird things. Maul is one of the unique dungeons because a lot of people would run it solo, a certain wing. Maul East, you would run solo to get minerals, to get herbs, stuff like that. You'd also get, obviously, like I said before, some recipes. But the main use of it was for a world buff. So what you did in Maul North was, if you skipped all of the guards and just killed the king right at the end, so if you skipped 3 or 4 of the bosses. Essentially, you kill the king at the very end of the instance, and you proclaim yourself the king or queen. And then you can run back through the instance and get certain buffs. So some were increased health, increased attack power, and I think another was like casting speed, something like that. Attack speed. It's something to do with that. But essentially, these world buffs were very much at the forefront of speedrunning raids during World of Warcraft Classics period. These are something that weren't necessarily meant to be brought into raid, and it wasn't scaled to bring all of the world buffs into raid, but people did it because they wanted to see passes being like how well you did on this certain boss compared to everyone in EU, how well your guild did, stuff like that. So yeah, they had a lot of unique properties with obviously the Warlock mount, with people just solo farming it for gold, and then with the world buffs that it could provide as well. So overall, it's quite intriguing, the dungeon, but I'm kind of taking it as a dungeon perspective, not as a world buff or like quest dungeon. I'm taking it as a pure dungeon, mobs to boss sort of ratio, how fun it is. And I would have to say it's a 6 out of 10. It's the mobs in there are a lot of mobs, and it's a very good dungeon to possibly like grind because of the amount of mobs that are in there. But essentially, it's not the most fun. It's quite fun running around the ruins and seeing the architecture of like old elvish like kind of thing. But apart from that, it's just loads of ogres and satyr. Nothing too sort of crazy, in all honesty. The only good things that you get are from the very last boss in Dimel North, and a couple pieces in like Dimel East, stuff like that. But essentially, yeah, you're looking at 1 or 2 pieces of gear for a lot of time in the instance. So it's not really worth the time to gear ratio, as I'm going to put it. But Dimel is a very unique dungeon, as it is a very unique setting for many different things. That is it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening. Make sure to check out the Patreon podcast for some ad-free content, as well as the Twitch and YouTube constant stuff happening over there. Once again, thank you all very much for listening, and go with Valor, friend. Goodbye all.